Hello friends, January 1996. We are in Bangalore, India. Today, the world knows this city as the Silicon Valley of India, a bustling hub of technology and traffic. But if we rewind the clock nearly 30 years, Bangalore was a very different place. It was known as the Garden City, quieter, darker, and in many peripheral areas, disturbingly isolated. It was a time when India had just opened its doors to the global economy, and international tourism was beginning to boom. Backpackers from Europe and America were flocking to the country, looking for adventure and culture. Among them were a 30-year-old British man named James William Stuart and his female companion, whose name has been withheld to protect her privacy. They were young, they were exploring the world, and they had just arrived from a trip through Nepal and Pakistan. They had no idea that their stop in Bangalore would trigger one of the most high-profile, diplomatic crises in the history of the state's police force. This story isn't just about a crime. It is a masterclass in old-school detective work. It's a story about how, in an era before CCTV cameras and GPS tracking, two brilliant police inspectors used basic human psychology and a security guard's sudden resignation to crack a case that threatened to destroy India's international reputation. What happened that night? How did two separate, brutal crimes occur simultaneously yet independently? And how did a simple bottle of beer lead to a confession? Let's get to the bottom of this. To understand the gravity of this event, we have to look at the timeline. It is the evening of January 4th, 1996. James and his companion are staying at the Sudha Lodge in the Cotton Pet area. This is a busy, somewhat chaotic part of the city. They decide to go out for dinner at a nearby restaurant. Up until this point, everything is normal. They are just two tourists enjoying a meal. But as the night progresses, a critical decision is made, a decision that splits their paths and seals their fates. After dinner, around 10 p.m., the couple separates. Now, reports suggest different reasons for this, but the most concrete evidence points to James having a specific agenda. He was reportedly looking to procure marijuana, a common occurrence on the backpacker trail in the 90s, and had arranged to meet a local contact. His companion, tired and perhaps uninterested in this detour, decided to head back to their hotel. She hailed an auto rickshaw, a three-wheeled motorized taxi ubiquitous in India. She thought she was taking a short, 5-minute ride back to safety. She was wrong. This is where the story splits into two terrifying, parallel tracks. Let's first follow the companion. She gets into an auto driven by a 28-year-old man named Kataresh. She gives him the destination, Cotton Pet. But Kataresh has other intentions. Instead of taking the crowded main roads, he veers off toward Mysore Road. Now, if you look at the map of Bangalore in 1996, this area leading toward RR Nagar was not the residential suburb it is today. It was desolate. It was dark. As the vehicle moves further into the darkness, the woman realizes something is wrong. She enters a state of high alert. When the auto stops in a secluded spot, the driver, Kataresh, makes his move. He attempts to assault her. But here is the twist. This woman was not a passive victim. In a moment of sheer survival instinct, she pulls out a small penknife she was carrying. As Kataresh lunges at her, she fights back, managing to stab him 3 times in the back. However, the physical disparity is too great. Enraged by the injury, Kataresh overpowers her. He brutally assaults her, leaving her battered on the side of the road before fleeing the scene. Despite the trauma, she manages to crawl back to the road, flag down a passing truck, and eventually reaches the Shamraj Pet police station around 11:30 p.m. But the nightmare wasn't over. Due to a language barrier, she spoke English, the constables spoke Kannada. There was confusion. They initially sent her back to her lodge, not fully grasping the magnitude of the crime until senior officers intervened later. While this horror was unfolding, a completely separate tragedy was taking place just a few miles away. James William Stuart had walked into a trap. He had been lured to an abandoned petrol bunk near Bryant Square. The man he was meeting was another auto rickshaw driver named Sanala. Sanala wasn't alone. He had brought 4 accomplices. They had promised James a drug deal, but their real motive was robbery. When James arrived, he realized it was a setup. The group surrounded him, demanding his valuables, his cash, his traveler's checks, his passport. James resisted. In the scuffle that followed, the situation escalated from robbery to lethal violence. One of the men struck James on the head with a heavy, blunt object. The blow caused a massive brain hemorrhage. Forensic analysis of his stomach contents later revealed that he died within minutes of the attack, very shortly after his last meal. Panic set in among the group. They now had a body on their hands. They loaded James into their vehicle and drove about 8 kilometers to Chandra Layout, an area that, back then, was essentially a wilderness on the city's edge. They dumped his body in a ditch and fled. So, by the morning of January 5, 1996, the Bangalore police woke up to a disaster. A British national was found dead in a ditch, and his companion had reported a violent sexual assault. The British High Commission immediately got involved. The pressure was immense. The media was asking, is there a gang targeting foreigners? Are tourists safe in India? The police commissioner, knowing the stakes, formed special squads. The investigation was split. Inspector Abdul Azim was assigned to solve the murder of James, and Inspector B.B. Ashok Kumar was tasked with catching the man who attacked the woman. Let's look at the murder investigation first. Inspector Abdul Azim, often called the Sherlock Holmes of the department, had 0 leads. No witnesses, no weapon, just a body in a ditch. But Azim knew that crimes in public spaces rarely go completely unseen. He started canvassing the area near the abandoned petrol bunk where the police suspected the initial meeting took place. He interviewed dozens of people, shopkeepers, local residents, street vendors. Nothing. But then, he noticed a tiny anomaly. There was a security guard named Mahadevaya who worked at a building overlooking the crime scene. When Azim went to question him, he found out that Mahadevaya had resigned from his job on January 6th, the very day after the body was found, and had fled to his village. Psychologically, this is a massive red flag. Why would a man with a steady job suddenly quit and run away right after a murder occurs nearby? Azim tracked him down. When the police found Mahadevaya, he was terrified. He wasn't the killer, but he was the key. Under questioning, he broke down. He told the police that on the night of January 4th, he had seen Sanala and his gang beating a foreigner. He saw them load the body into the auto. The next day, Sanala had returned and threatened the guard. If you open your mouth, you'll end up in a ditch just like him. Fear had silenced him. But Azim's instinct to chase the missing employee broke the case wide open. Based on this testimony, the police picked up Sanala. He confessed, and one by one, the other 4 accomplices were arrested. The motive was confirmed, a robbery gone wrong. Now, let's switch to the investigation of the assault on the woman. This was equally challenging. The victim was traumatized and couldn't identify the spot in the dark. But Inspector B.B. Ashok Kumar focused on one crucial detail she provided. I stabbed him in the back. This was the forensic breakthrough. The perpetrator was wounded. He would need medical attention. Kumar didn't waste time looking for the auto. He started looking for the wound. He deployed his team to every clinic, hospital, and nursing home in and around the suspected area. They asked a simple question: has anyone come in recently with stab wounds on their back? For days, they hit dead ends. Then, they struck gold at the Saubagia nursing home. A nurse reported that a man named Kataresh had come in on the morning of January 5th to get stitches for 3 distinct cuts on his back. He had claimed he fell on some glass, but the wounds were consistent with a knife attack. The police tracked Kataresh to his home. But here is where the police work gets psychologically fascinating. When they brought Kataresh in, he denied everything. He stuck to his story about falling on glass. In 1996, we didn't have DNA technology as advanced as we do today to instantly link him to the victim. They needed a confession. Inspector Kumar decided to use a technique that is rarely discussed in textbooks. He realized that aggressive interrogation wasn't working. Kataresh was too hardened. So, Kumar changed the atmosphere. He initiated what is now famously referred to in police circles as the beer session. He sat down with the accused, not as an interrogator, but almost like a confidant. He offered Kataresh a beer, specifically, reports say, a bottle of Kingfisher. They started drinking together. The tension in the room dissipated. As the alcohol lowered Kataresh's inhibitions, Kumar started talking to him man-to-man, stroking his ego, empathizing with his bad luck. Slowly, Kataresh began to talk. He boasted about his night. He let slip details that only the attacker could know. He eventually admitted that the foreign lady had stabbed him, and he attacked her in retaliation. Unbeknownst to Kataresh, This entire conversation was being documented. This confession, combined with the medical records of his injuries and the victim's identification of his vehicle, sealed his fate. The conclusion of this case was swift and severe, setting a precedent for how the Indian judicial system handles crimes against tourists. The investigations were kept separate to ensure that legal technicalities in one didn't derail the other. By April 1997, just over a year later, the court delivered its verdict on the murder case. Sanala and his 4 accomplices were found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. A year later, in 1998, the separate trial for Kataresh concluded. The evidence of the stab wounds and the survivor's testimony were irrefutable. He, too, was sentenced to life in prison. So, what is the takeaway from this dark chapter? First, it shattered the illusion that the 2 crimes were connected. For a long time, the public believed this was a coordinated gang attack on the couple. The investigation proved otherwise. It was a tragic coincidence of 2 separate predatory groups striking the same couple on the same night. It highlights the randomness of criminal opportunity. Second, it changed policing in Bangalore. The case highlighted the need for better regulation of auto rickshaw drivers. Following this, the police began enforcing stricter background checks and mandating that driver identification be displayed in vehicles, a practice that continues today. And finally, it showed the power of observation. Whether it was noticing a security guard's sudden resignation or remembering a victim's statement about a penknife, the detectives solved these cases not with high-tech gadgets, but with sharp minds and an understanding of human behavior. This case remains a somber reminder of the vulnerabilities travelers face, but also a testament to the fact that when the system works, justice can be delivered swiftly, even against the odds. Thank you for watching. If you found this case analysis intriguing, make sure to share this video. Stay safe, stay aware.